Well, thanks, Tim. That was not that was not a light keynote this year. Welcome to the Ray Wenderlich live cast for the WWDC 19 announcements. We're going to be talking about both the keynote and the State of the Union. I have a great stellar team from the Ray Wenderlich group here. My name is Drew Freeman, and I'm just going to go down the line and I'll let everybody on the guest list introduce themselves. Audrey?
Oh, hi. I'm Audrey. Am I appearing or not? Anyway, I write tutorials, I've done video courses, and I've written some chapters in the machine learning book that just came out.
Jennifer?
Hi, I'm Jennifer Bailey, and I'm currently working on the Android team for Ray Wenderlich.
Josh Steele?
I'm Josh Steele. I work on iOS screencasts for the site.
Joshua Green?
Hey, I am Joshua Green. I write books and create videos for RayWenderlich.com.
And Ray Fix?
Hi, so I do videos and books, and sometimes I do topics for the iOS group.
So I've got to start out. The past few years, one of the comments, and we covered this last year, was that the WWDC keynote becomes somewhat underwhelming. And I pretty well can say that this year did not do that. In general, let me just go through the list of folks here now. And what was just your general impression from the keynote? Ray, we'll start on you for this end.
Well, I really thought that this was the high order bit here is Swift UI for me. I think it's like the most important thing since 2014 when they actually announced Swift. It's a major, it's a shift in the way people write apps. So there's tons of content and announcements today, but for me, that was the news of the day.
Josh Green?
Definitely agree with Ray there. The Swift UI, oh, that's so exciting, especially the cross-platform capabilities that they're introducing. It really introduces just a lot of new opportunities that, traditional iOS developers can just jump right into.
Mr. Steele?
Yeah, I mean, I'll agree with them, and I'll add on to it that they hit everything, which is a little good, a little bad. It was a jam-packed keynote, so much that some things might have gotten a little ignored or a little bit not enough attention was paid to them. iOS was kind of, I think in my opinion, glossed over a little, but things like Swift UI and macOS really got a lot of attention, and it was well-deserved. But they hit everything. They hit Watch, they hit tvOS, they hit iOS, they hit macOS.
To add to your comment, it was rather interesting because there was a slight leak that iPadOS was going to become its own version of the OS, and it really felt like they talked about iOS as if it was these are all the things that are coming out for the iPhone and the iPad, and then they said, "But wait a minute," and then they stacked iPadOS on top of iOS.
Yep, I agree. Yeah, it was nice to see that distinction. It'll be interesting to see where it goes in the future and how separate, if any, really it is from the main iOS core.
And of course, Jen Bailey, my partner this season. Did you get a chance to soak in anything from the keynote?
You bet. So I would say my overall impression is that I want an iPhone, and it's going to be, I had dreams of a Pixel, but I think I want an iPhone, and I'm wishing I could get an Apple Watch and hadn't just bought myself a new Fitbit, which I like, but I'm so impressed by some of the things they're doing. And it looked like they were catching up to, or not catching up, but it looked like they were emulating a lot of the things that Android does that I like. So I was really seriously thinking, wow, I might need an iPhone.
And that's always interesting to hear from the Android folks.
I've not said it often.
And it's hard to. Jen's this first half of the season while I'm doing iOS technology. Second half of the season, we'll be doing more Android technology. So Jen will have a lot more that she can offer. But it's good to see that we've got a keynote that was so fully packed that it's Android convertible at this point. Audrey, was there anything that stood up to you?
Well, I didn't actually watch the keynote because it was at 3 a.m. my time. But the State of the Union pretty much showed Swift UI is the thing to do.
Yeah, I think Swift UI. I'm sorry, go ahead. I didn't mean to interrupt.
There were some other interesting things as well, but we'll talk about that when we get to State of the Union.
Yeah, I definitely am going to agree with the entire panel and say that Swift UI isn't merely a language, isn't merely a framework on top of the language. It's a game changer for Swift as a language. It's a game changer for development for Apple products as a whole, being as though you've now got a code base that is going to just go full stack from watch all the way up to desktop. We did get to talk about a lot of other things. Now, I guess one of the big reveals that everybody had been waiting for was that little piece of hardware they turned out. There's now a Mac Pro server-ish, desktop-ish monstrosity, and let's just not forget cheese grater. Does anybody want to throw in on that one? Let's start. Ray, do you have anything on the Pro?
Yeah, when they first showed the intro video, I think they showed a picture of the fan, like this circular fan, and I was like, "Did they do that again? Like make another trash can?" But no, it turned out it was a full-on cheese grater, and they're really owning the cheese grating. You know, like that front shot and the size of the holes just really.
Mm-hmm. It's really nice because I was hoping for something like the G4 throwback where you could take the side off and really dig into this thing, and they really went there.
Yeah, but that said, they're solving real problems like those vents. You know, the cooling is a big issue, and you know the handles. Now, hey, now you can actually pick the thing up without cutting your hand like on the old cheese grater.
Or optional wheels.
Don't forget the wheels. Yeah, the wheels. Yeah.
Now they said that this thing has, what was it, a 1.4 kilowatt power supply.
Correct.
Wow.
So your electric bill is definitely going to show the fact that you're a pro user. So I've got to ask you all, are any of you going to go after one if you can?
I can almost afford the stand.
Yeah, right.
Yes, it's interesting. They've introduced a $4,000 monitor with a stand that's almost impossible to pay for. But that monitor, that 32-inch 6K Retina, that stuff the dreams are made of as well, and it is a wonderful monitor. If I heard correctly, the MacBook Pro should be able to power 2 of those.
Wow.
That's right.
And of course the Tower Pro can power 6 of those. Oh yeah, the thing they almost was a throwaway was the fact that they are making a rack mount version of this of the Pro, and that's very impressive.
Yeah, I think the handles make a lot of sense when they showed that rack mount picture. That looked awesome.
Yeah.
So the big things were, we knew that we were going to see the new operating systems, new watchOS, new iOS, new iPadOS, and of course, new macOS. Which of them do you feel really showed the most advancement this round? Let's start with Ray.
Well, surprisingly, I'll say watchOS because you know it's Independence Day for the watchOS, which is a pretty interesting story. That the fact that you can now create a watch app without having to have a iOS app tag along with it, and it has its own app store, and you can send notifications. So it's become its own platform, really.
Okay, Josh Green.
I really like the Mac OS as far as just a lot of developers weren't developing for it. And I think that they know this too. If you're going mainstream, sure, you're hitting the Windows platform and so forth. But I think with, the conversion from iOS developers and lowering the bar, it's really going to be a game changer as far as, the number of apps that there are going to be available. I'm really excited about that.
Yeah, and now it's interesting that a lot of us were curious about Marzipan and what was going to happen there. And then they turned around and didn't just hand us Marzipan, but they handed us Swift UI. So you've basically now got two ways of going from iOS into your Mac development. And you've got your choice. What Project Catalyst is Marzipan. Mm-hmm. And then Swift UI gives you the new framework that still is going to let you go between platforms. Josh Steele, do you have any feelings on which OS really advanced today, or are you happy with all of them?
Yeah, I mean, I'd have to agree with Mac OS probably getting the lead against everyone else there. It's got more places to go than anywhere else, just because it does have the ability for everyone to bring their apps over to the platform. It's getting some of the stuff that was on iOS before, like screen time. It's getting the split of iTunes. Let's throw one back for iTunes. It is no more Apple Music, Apple Podcasts, Apple TV. It's sort of a whole new road for Mac OS.
No more pop-ups.
Yeah, no more pop-ups. Yeah, that's right.
Now here's a question, because one of the comments that I heard from some of the developers is that the Marzipan apps that we saw last year, Stocks and News Plus, felt a little on the weak side. Mm-hmm. How do you feel about what you've seen so far in the Project Catalyst apps that have come across? Do they look like they're going to be as robust, or does it look like it's going to require that native design that's going to come out of Swift UI? Let's go to you, Ray, on this one.
Yeah. So you think about like when would you use Project Catalyst? And I think the use case is if you have an iPad app that is currently that works great, and you want to get that over onto the Mac, Project Catalyst is a pretty easy, frictionless way to get over fast. Mm-hmm. And it'll be interesting to see, the devil's in the details. Can you make it feel good enough? And apparently they've been working on that this year. So I'm going to be interested to learn this week about that. But I think if you're going with a new project, Project Catalyst, using that doesn't really make a lot of sense. You would probably want to try to go Swift UI.
It looks like I may have actually caught one more person in on the crew. I guess Jono Mittelfeld is trying to get logged in at the moment. We were trying to get Jono in, so we'll see if he gets through. He was having some technical difficulties earlier on. I was really, really thrilled to back off of macOS for a second to see how far the voice control and accessibility went. I knew that there was some voice control, but I did not know that it went to the depth that it did. They showed both in the State of the Union as well as in the keynote somebody really navigating far down. And in the State of the Union, which we'll get onto a little later, they showed the fact that you could repeat controls and actually zoom in on a map.
That was like Blade Runner.
What is your experience? It really, for that moment, felt absolutely futuristic when they said, go to grid 25, enhance. It felt like every science fiction television show I've ever seen.
Wait, they were showing it.
Audrey, did you want to add something there?
No.
Okay.
I'm just agreeing. That was pretty cool.
Okay. Joshua, you were going to say something?
Yeah, I was watching it, and they're showing accessibility, but I'm thinking hands-free driving. Everything that you can actually do now without having to reach up and touch your device while you're in the car. Oh, that's going to be awesome.
Mm-hmm. Well, it's interesting that they coupled the accessibility. Go ahead.
Oh, I'm sorry. A point that they often make is accessibility is for everyone, right? So, I don't know about hands-free driving, but certainly I could see it being used in my normal workflow occasionally.
Mm-hmm.
Aha, I think we have Jano Mittelfeld joining us. Jano, can you hear? Okay.
Yeah, I can hear you. Can you hear me? Yep.
Yes,
Okay.
we can hear you as well. Why don't you introduce yourself really quickly so people know who you are and what you do with the team?
Oh, okay. Yeah, so I'm Jano. I joined about a year ago the Ray Wenderlich team, and I do tutorials for the iOS team. I also help tech edit the Swift on Server Kitura book, and I'm just having a lot of fun doing it, I guess.
Mm. And of course, I can't comment on anything that or the Ray Wenderlich team is going to turn out. I wouldn't be surprised if there's going to be a Swift UI book coming sometime soon, but that's up to these guys to do. I just do the podcast. So I want to back over to AR and AR kit and the reality kit poser, but for me the stunning thing there was not the reality kit, which is really impressive. It's what they've added to AR kit with two seemingly innocuous additions, and that being the people occlusion and the motion capture. Both of which absolutely blew my mind, because you're basically being able to tell where the living real object is amongst all your AR, and having your AR objects either occlude them or not occlude them based on its assumption in that space as well. And that blew my mind, and they show that mocap is there as part of the OS now.
Yeah, and because machine learning is in everything, they said they use machine learning to build those algorithms to detect the people occlusion.
So
I was actually very excited about this, because this was something I wanted to do a tutorial about anyway, about a year, or not about a year ago, about half a year ago or so, but it was going to be a lot more complicated, because you would have to figure out the depth data yourself and figure out what you wanted to occlude, and then create a mask, and it was going to be a big mess and a big pain, but I really wanted to do it, and now this is much easier. I'm happy to let Apple do the work.
Yeah, the motion capture is going to be a big one I've talked to a few people who want to do something like be able to track people who are trying to do exercises or something like that, and sort of compare it with the ideal kind of thing, so that you can say that your body is tracking wrong or something like this. And so it's going to lead to that sort of app.
And that wouldn't just be fitness, that'd be sports most likely as well. If you take things like the one that you see most often is a golf swing, or possibly a football pass, or a European football pass. It's just the capabilities there are unbelievable. So let me wind back. Oh, bad pun. Wind back to the Watch OS, which we talked about is now independent. But there was so much that was also added in, at least on the keynote level for the public. They had the new watch faces, they had the taptic chimes, the audio books, but then there are all the APIs. They're putting in the streaming audio, they're putting the extended runtime, so that you're able to actually have those notifications that are coming from the app itself rather than being pushed. Have any of you done any Watch OS development?
I have only done watch development for Wear OS, and it might be the watch that switches me over to iPhone, actually. And the reminders feature is what blew me away. So I've almost got to have that.
So
I wrote chapters. I wrote chapters in the original Watch OS by tutorials, and I was given core motion. And the very first thing I wanted to write was something that would detect when somebody fell down and didn't get up again, which you couldn't do back then, because you couldn't keep the app running all the time. And now Apple's already done it. So, but that kind of thing, yeah.
Actually, in retrospect, I'm realizing I don't think I really caught anything I could describe as Sherlocking. Well, there was the swipe keyboard, but in general, normally I walk out of WWDC with about 3 to 5 items that I say, that was Sherlock, etc. And for those listeners who are not familiar, Sherlock was a search application that was a standalone third-party search application. And then at one point, Apple added the exact same search functionality into the OS, killing the Sherlock application. And thus the term Sherlocking was born, which meant that Apple had cannibalized the third-party product by creating it in the OS themselves. Now, admittedly, we have the swiping keyboard, which I learned back at Google I/O is called a Gboard, which makes me laugh quite a lot. But other than that, and I was concerned when they talked about the way they were going to consider the apps that were on the iPad coming to Mac. It almost sounded like they were going to go after SetApp. But honestly, did anybody else detect anything that really felt like, well, that group does this technology?
Well, there's the sidecar with the so the Luna display came out about a year.
Okay,
year
yes,
ago or
yes.
so.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah, there are a couple of companies that do that.
There's the bug reporting feedback. I think there's a number. Screenshot feedback kind of thing for bug reporting, and now that's built into test flight.
Yeah, it's Instabug that has the if you shake it or if you take a screenshot, Instabug can capture that and process that to whatever you're using, like Jira and the like. So good. Well, good. I'm glad we were able to find a couple of them there.
Well, sorry, there's also Test Plan, because I just wrote that tutorial about using Travis and the other guy. And yeah, because they mentioned that they want you to get their Xcode server and use that for all your automated testing. And if you can only run test plans and all that using Xcode server and not using Travis, then that's going to take some business away, I think.
And then there's one guy who about 3 weeks ago started selling jailbreaks for Apple TV so that you could connect third-party controllers. So he was apparently pretty upset at the announcement of that.
And Ray, you were going to add one other thing in?
Yeah, just the SF symbols.
Oh, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
SF symbols. I mean, it's nice to have, but it's, some icon seller out there is.
There also were a few calculator apps that were made for Apple Watch, and so calculator has been Sherlocked. Yeah.
Yes.
It's got a tip calculator feature, so you can calculate a tip and split it amongst your friends.
There you go.
Couldn't you ask Siri to do that before anyway? Couldn't you ask Siri to perform calculations before anyway, like verbally?
Yes. Yes, Siri would always be able to do verbal calculations.
No, this is more like the 80s Casio calculator on your wrist type thing.
Now, one of the requested features, and I had thought about it on the TV, but I hadn't seen it requested as much, but it has been requested across the building, was multiple users for Siri, for HomePod, for the TV. And I didn't hear much throughout the day on that one, but I'm going to assume that there is going to be an API for being able to deal with multiple users on iDevices. Let's see.
I really liked how with the HomePod, it would switch between your phone and the HomePod as you come home or leave again. That's really nice. Yeah, that was really cool.
Handoff is a great technology that doesn't see it. It's a very quiet technology that people don't really acknowledge is there, but when it's taken advantage of, and when applications use it very well, it's unbelievable to just be able to drop from one device to another seamlessly. So let's see.
That's another big sell to Apple for me, is how all your devices integrate so nicely. You only have to log in with one login. That'd be nice.
Siri's now using neural text speech. Did you feel that the new text and the new Siri sounded like an improvement? Let's start with Josh Steele on that one.
Yeah, I did. It felt a little more natural. There were the breaks were a little bit more proper. The speech kind of went up and down like you would expect it to. It wasn't as choppy and robotic as it has been in the past. I don't know how realistic the iOS 12 demo they gave was. I think I've heard it speak better, a little bit better than that, but it did sound like the iOS 13 improvements were pretty good.
Josh or Ray or Yano, do you have anything on the new Siri voice?
Sounded good. They were using strange words like enthalpy and things like that. So
Yeah.
maybe they had sort of cherry picked some words that it didn't do well with before.
You don't use that in everyday speech, Ray?
I don't know. It looks like they've legitimately improved receptive vocabulary too, though. I was pretty impressed with it. Hopefully, we'll see some nice improvements in its listening.
So let's talk about iPad OS and some of the changes and the fact that iPad OS now floats as its own first-class operating system. It looks like you've now got the ability to have multiple iterations of an app running at one time. With the split view and the multi-window app, you basically can be dragging and dropping between one iteration of an app and another iteration of the same app. This seems like an underspoken game changer for the way that windowing and multitasking works in the iOS world. Let me start with Josh Green on this one.
Yeah, I definitely want to look into how that whole what do they call it? A window scene view? Is that what it was? Something along those lines? How that works, right?
Scene delegate, I think, right?
Split view. Well, in the keynote, they called it the split view multi-window, and then they talked about it in the other session. I just don't have that note up yet at the moment.
The Swift UI introduces a new concept as well with how windows work. So it sounds like they're really doubling down on good separation between and even getting rid of the controller in a lot of cases. So I'm really excited about that. I'm excited to get dive into the tutorials that they have. They look really impressive. So we'll have to one up that.
Josh Steele or Ray Fix or Yano, do you have anything you want to add there?
Yeah, I mean, from the technical side, it looked like in the State of the Union that they've actually split the app delegate into an app delegate and a screen delegate. And you can have multiple screen delegates, and those are the things that are managing your windows. So when you see that screen expose that pops up on iPad now, you're seeing the instances of the screen delegate that are appearing and managing all your separate windows, and that allows you to drag and drop between it. So that's a different, that's a game changer sort of in how we think about that initial delegate. It's not just the big honking app delegate now. It's actually got screen delegates that we have to worry about.
And if you have an app that previously, whenever you would start the app, it would go back to the full startup. Now they're really talking about you need to maintain what the app state was if you're going to have multiple iterations, because you can't just have an app come up and then you're going to drag it into another instance where you now have to wait for that app to come up. You need to be able to drag it into its list. And I can say this for one because my own personal project, it doesn't work that way. I don't have a managed user state, so that's something that got me worried there. I liked the slide over history because I like using slide over a lot and being able to say, okay, right now I'm sliding over into this messaging app, but I need to slide over into mail for a second, and then to be able to see that history of my slide overs. That's a beautiful piece of technology. And then to hit a couple of other things really quickly on iPad OS, the Files app really getting a columnar view is, I think, a plus for being able to drill down through things. And of course, able to share USB drive into an iPad, something I think we've all been waiting for, to be able to transfer those files.
Now, what does it mean regarding iPad that Safari is now a desktop class browser? It says that they added 30 keyboard shortcuts and make it faster to navigate.
So my impression was that when Safari loads on iPad, it adds a mobile platform And my guess is that the user information or the thing that it sends, help me with terminology here, the string that's sent out from the browser to identify what it is going to identify as a desktop-based browser, so that whatever web page comes in will be the desktop version of that. Really great example there is if you're using something like Wikipedia, you'll be getting the full Wikipedia rather than the mobile Wikipedia, which is vastly different.
Oh, that makes sense.
Does anybody else have an opinion on that one?
It's just a guess, but I'm guessing they changed the client, the client browser.
I can't remember the term.
Yeah.
All right. So we've covered pretty much the hardware, the software. We've talked about Catalina and ARKit. Let's take a moment and really talk now about SwiftUI. It is a game changer, but it also I looked at it, and I'll start with, I can't swear on the podcast, so that was my general reaction. Was I just didn't know what to make of it initially. I'm always terrified when somebody says, well, these 500 lines will now go away and you'll have 10 lines, because it made me feel like I'm definitely missing something, that there's something I'm not going to have access to. They showed me a lot of buttons, and they showed me buttons, text, and images, and that seems like it's missing a whole cadre of widgets that I might want to live in. So, I mean, it's a game changer and it's positive. Does anybody have any concerns? Let me start, Jana, with you.
Jana, we don't hear you.
Jana, are you? Jana, I'm going to come back to you because right now you seem to be frozen on my screen, and I want to give you a chance to possibly retoggle your settings. Let's go to Josh Steele.
So yeah, with SwiftUI, sorry, I had to think about what the question was again. Yeah, I mean, I sort of had the same misgivings as you. I really want to look into their example they gave in the keynote, where they were like, look at this 300 lines of code. It's collapsed down to this. It's like, but wait a minute. What am I missing there? What are you hiding, first of all? What do I want to be able to see? What's hidden behind all the inspectors, behind the widgets? It's mainly focused on building the views. So how are we kind of connecting that over to the old view controller mentality and where we had a lot of our logic in before? There's a lot of open questions. So yeah, I think it's great. I think it's exciting. I think it's a new and different way to do it, but I need more information. I need more research to kind of see how it fits in with the paradigm. I did read something today though that said that SwiftUI and UIKit, as we do it now, will continue to play well together, which is nice. So you can use SwiftUI components in your current apps, and you kind of make the transition as you can or feel comfortable with it, and which is a bonus.
Jana, are you back with us at this point?
Can you hear me now?
Yep.
Yes, I can. Thank you so much.
Perfect. Yeah. So I was actually very curious also how custom views are going to look. So they showed a couple of things where they stack things together vertically or horizontally, but I've worked on projects where we've really customized the heck out of some of the views. So it'll be very interesting to see how you get that deep into it and be able to customize something like that and then be able to reuse it later. So because they showed some things like that, but not in depth because it was just a keynote or the state of the platform, right? So it'll be a very interesting thing.
Audrey, did you have any? Sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off there.
No, I was basically done. I was just basically saying we're gonna have to wait for the sessions to see how that plays out, and probably there'll be also iterations over time too.
Audrey, you got to watch the State of the Union. What was your general impression as far as SwiftUI?
Game changer and all that, and the tutorials are already up, written by our very own Marin, and and it does get all the way down to integrating with UIKit. So that's quite promising. I pretty much have faith in Apple that, you know, they'll start with the things that people most often use, and then, you know, as they go along, they'll add more of UIKit into SwiftUI. And guess what my quick strike tutorial is going to be about at the end of the week?
I'm looking forward to it. I'm looking forward to just trying to immerse in this, and it's harsh too, because I have an app that is nigh feature complete, and I want to release it in September, October, whenever the new OS releases. I want to play with SwiftUI, but at the same time, I don't want to overcomplicate and start adding new stuff. So I have to be really careful on how I'm going to play with that. Ray, what was your pluses and minuses as far as SwiftUI?
Yeah, so at this point, I don't know enough about it to really say if there are minuses. I see a lot of pluses right now. So the things that they mentioned are that it's declarative, automatic, compositional, and has consistency, right? And so you get these. Those are the points that they laid out in the State of the Union. But I was looking at some of the APIs, and they're using the leading edge Swift 5.1 stuff, like return types for the view protocol, where things return some view, but it doesn't specify the exact view that's being returned. And as well as the at state, those are the new property getters. So there's a lot of new Swift features that have just been approved that were built into it. So they must have been going crazy doing parallel development of Swift features along with that library. So the core team was very involved in this in the Swift UI design, and because of that, I have to think that it's going to be really good.
So, I mean, with SwiftUI, we've spilled pretty well into the State of the Union. I think we've basically covered everything in the keynote, from the hardware to a lot of the OSs and some of the new features that the public will see. But the State of the Union is Apple's chance to say, you've seen all the really nifty stuff that's coming. What does it mean to you, and what tools are the developers going to have that will allow them to make these apps as robust and as amazing? And of course, one tool that immediately comes to mind is Xcode. And Xcode, it feels like this year Xcode grew up. They did some things with Xcode that were absolutely, to me, astounding. The diffs, which you can now in live time not just look at what you've changed, but compare it right next to the original code. The moving of a lot of different editors around as you need them. Of course, the SwiftUI brings in the Canvas editor that comes in with it. And there is now the mini map, which has been in a lot of other IDEs for quite some time. But I think not only did we get the mini map that we've been wanting, we got a mini map on steroids, because it also gives us recognition of the documentation markup, and it gives us the there was a floating command shortcut to be able to actually thumb through that mini map. So what were your general impressions of Xcode and what you saw? Let's start this time with Ray.
Yeah, it's really, there were a lot of neat little features in there, and as a tool that I use every day, I'm always excited to have stuff that improvement. So being able to rearrange the windows sort of the way you want, and it's actually a feature that has been in Eclipse forever, but this ability to focus and unfocus a window full screen seems like that'll be a very useful muscle memory type thing to use.
Yano?
Yeah, so when I saw that initially, I thought, this looks, when they did the demo of writing code and showing it appear in the simulated iPhone, I was like, this looks a lot like Swift Playgrounds. I wonder if they have this working on an iPad right now. And additionally, when they showed the different editors and you can focus, I'm like, that would be very handy if you're coding on an iPad. So I'm wondering if this is like a hint of what we're getting in the future, if this Xcode for iPad ever comes out, besides just sidecarding Xcode to the iPad itself.
Josh Green.
Yeah, I totally loved how real time and how live it looked in the demos there. I haven't had a chance to play too much with it myself, but I love what they're doing with making it more playground-y, and how Swift UI just seems to just really flow well together there. So I'm really excited about the improvements and the integration that they have between the two of them this go around.
Josh Steele.
Yeah, I mean the preview pane and just the ability to interact with it like you were interacting with the simulator was great. What kind of blew my mind was when they brought up the device next to Xcode, changed some attributes in Xcode, and the app on the device updated. And everybody was like, that's the simulator. No. That's the device that just updated live. That, I think, is just amazing. That's going to change the way a lot of people think about doing their testing, doing just their normal debugging. It's going to be a game changer to be able to look at it on device.
And Audrey.
Oh, well, yeah, very impressive. There are people working on Xcode who have worked on Reveal app. Do you know the Reveal app, the view debugger? And that's for a long time has done that. You've got your view debugger running, you make a little change in it, and it's reflected immediately in the running app. So a little bit of almost Sherlocking happening here.
Sherlock the developers.
They work. They work for Apple now.
Yeah, Apple grabbed them all.
And before I go on to other things, I actually wanted to back up to Swift UI to an example they showed in the State of the Union, where they were talking about the previews that you could do, where you just basically can preview a segment of your code, where you're not just looking at the whole UI, but you can look at the UI segment, and then you can actually throw iterations at your UI segment to change different variables and see them all next to each other. And be able to evaluate, well, this font or this font weight or this color, and just be able to run through them in multiple iterations. And I thought that was absolutely astounding.
Yeah.
Sorry, go Josh.
I was going to say the other thing on top of that was the, they mentioned when you're looking at it in sort of that preview state, what data do you populate it with? And so they now got the ability to put a little module of data down at the bottom that the elements can reference, and you can check that in with your code. You can let other people use it, but it gives you the ability to see actual real live data in that preview pane, as opposed to just fake data that you're throwing in.
And I also like the fact that you can localize with that as well, because you're dealing with English, and I don't remember which WWDC video it was that basically said the shorter the word, the longer it will be in another language. I mean, for anybody who's tried localizing from English into German, they've seen their UIs fall apart, and having that live ability to go right into your strings file, pull that stuff out, and run it, it's fantastic.
Yep.
So we all know that with Swift 5, we got the ABI stability, and the one thing that we were all waiting on was the module stability, which they promptly said, yes, that's today. We've got that as well. And then on top of that, Swift Package Manager, which the problem is hasn't been integrated into Xcode and it hasn't been able to work with iOS. Well, that's been changed as well. Have any of you done any work with Swift Package Manager?
So I have. This was actually not joking. This was like the number one thing I was hoping to see in the keynote or the State of the Union, and that's because like I did work on a project doing Swift on server, and we used Swift Package Manager fairly heavily. I just kind of fell in love with it. I was like, I wish I could use this everywhere, because it was just so, for me, intuitive, easy to use, and I enjoyed not having these external dependencies like Cocoa or not Cocoa, CocoaPods or Carthage and stuff like that. So this was good news for me.
Yeah, I was surprised because I know that Swift Package Manager has been sort of the desired end game for Swift to not necessarily Sherlock, but to create a more integrated solution, CocoaPods or Carthage. And this looks like that's that first step to get there.
Yeah, but the stuff they showed, the code is the easy part. I want to see how resources is going to be handled, and bringing in images, bringing in bundle type stuff, right? That's the tricky thing. I think they've been talking about this in the forums and so forth, and there was ideas thrown around. I haven't seen any concrete PRs or anything for this. I want to see whether they release any of that magic, because without that, I mean, come on, how are you going to use this in a big boy app? I need more than code.
Mm-hmm.
Very good.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
Pay no attention to the man in front of the curtain either. So one of the interesting things they introduced was no longer sign in with Facebook, sign in with Google. Now they want you to sign in with Apple.
Mm-hmm.
This is a one-stop user verification, user establishment system that has Apple's degree of privacy. One of the interesting things that was added with that one is you can give them an address, an email address, but not your email address, a completely randomized email address, and as many as you want to for everybody who asks. They weren't the prettiest email addresses, but they deliver to your email account. I'm actually kind of curious how you filter and turn those off in time, but nonetheless, it's still a very interesting feature. Reactions to it. Let's start with you, Ray.
Yeah, I think it's a really, it's Apple's story of privacy that they, that's a differentiator for them. So they're going to use that and keep using it. And that's great, I think, for us consumers, because, and I think it's great because, when you are trying to just prototype or build some simple app, if you can just implement sign in with a few lines of code and have all that security, that's great. If you need something more, like if your business model ends up depending on it, maybe you have to do some other things too. But I think it's great to have that option as a developer and as a user.
Now, I think one of the things that you're definitely losing from the sign in with Apple that you do get from sign in with, say, Facebook, is if you are trying to create some kind of social system where you do say, well, if you join in, you can have access to your friends to have access to this as well. So you lose that because you're definitely going to get that kind of social connection that you get from the other two systems.
Sure.
Does anybody else have a comment on the sign in with Apple?
I've got a concern about it, actually. Somebody posted something along the lines of signing with Apple will be available for beta testing in the summer, but it'll be a required option for users and apps that support third-party sign-in. So it sounds like there's a bit of Apple dictatorship coming along here, where if you're doing any third-party sign-in, you're going to have to support their stuff. So it doesn't seem like it's truly an optional thing coming down the pipe here.
I hadn't heard that. Where did you get that?
Yeah, this was on our forums here, actually. Somebody posted it in one of the Ray Wenderlich chats. So I'm going to look and see if we can actually figure out where that was from. But it looks like it's a screenshot. So I want to see if that's really the way they're going to go or not there. But that's very Apple-y to me. Like, that would not surprise me if they push that.
I saw that on Twitter too, and the person who commented on it seemed to think that their own solution for sign-in or for accounts wasn't going to be affected by this. He was going to implement this Apple, sign in with Apple anyway, because he believes in that. But I think he interpreted it to mean that if you currently use sign in with Google or sign in with Facebook, you would also have to include sign in with Apple as an option, maybe. But if you implement your own login, then you're still okay.
Yeah, I think if you just got the username and password, or you're rolling your own system, I think you're fine. I don't think you have to have it, but if you have this third-party auth stuff, it looks like it's a requirement. So it's an add-on if you already have add-ons.
Now, one of the comments they made is that the sign-in with Apple has 2FA, and I don't know if they're just saying that Apple Login has the capability of 2FA, or in the future, everybody will be using 2FA with Apple Sign-On. That wasn't exactly clear. But one of the other things they were talking about using machine learning to identify whether or not an Apple user was an actual Apple user, real user indicator, where they were using on-device intelligence to see how that account had been used, what the account history was, to give you basically a bit that would tell you, yes, user's okay, we sanction it. It's sort of like a gatekeeper that we either think it's okay or we think you should put up another layer of defense first. And I think I'm seeing a smile there from Josh on that one.
We got to stop all those users mining for gold in our apps. Apple's now backing us on that.
This is though nothing new for companies in general. This is something that Google does now. So Google initially bought that CAPTCHA company that we all love to hate because you have to type in these numbers you can't read anyway. And then they switched over to this, click on all the buses or all the street signs or all the whatever it is, storefronts. And you're like, well, I can see like 3 pixels of a storefront in this corner. Do I click on that or not? Right. And then their next iteration of that is actually doing exactly what Apple was commenting, where basically they look for certain indicators of what is normal and unnormal, usage for an account. Like, it could be anything from like the time of day that the person is logging in to I don't even know, like, IP addresses or whatever. And they can combine all that down, distill that down into a single indicator as to whether or not this person is real or a robot. And so this is not new, but it's good that, I guess it's a good thing that we have that. I guess it'll be interesting to see how much we trust it initially and how long it takes before we just like, yeah, it's fine.
It's always an arms race.
So 2 of the technologies that got a good bit of love this time around were, of course, machine learning and metal. Now, let me ask of the group the group that's here tonight, has anybody done a good deal of machine learning in the group?
I wrote some chapters.
So do you have any general impressions from what they've added into machine learning as far as you saw in the State of the Union?
Well, the bit about personalizing it on the device. So you can basically, the user is updating the machine learning model on their own device without it having to go back anywhere. That's major. That is a big deal.
Yeah, so you're basically getting so Core ML itself was relatively small when it first came out. It was you have a model and then you can just sort of just address it like it's any other model that you have in your application. But now they're basically saying the Core ML model can now be modified and adjusted as per use in the app.
Yeah, I mean, Siri supposedly does it, but even that, I mean, Siri goes back to Apple and then comes back to you. But this is entirely on device. So your privacy, none of your data goes anywhere. So you've got this app and it's supposed to be finding, irons or something, and you point it at something and it's misinterprets it or, misclassifies it. And you can say, no, that's wrong. And it will learn from your reactions to what its predictions are, and it will update itself. Just for you, just for you and the things that you are looking at.
Which is interesting too, because that means that if I believe that it is, you believe that it's not, then we have 2 different models now that will interpret differently because it is personalized on each of our own devices.
Yeah, there could be some.
IBM Watson does a little bit of that, but again, you have to send it back to IBM Watson. Somebody there, they advise you that, somebody there should actually cleanse the data that's coming back in from the users before they put it back through the model. And then you can write the app such that new models get downloaded automatically, but it's still gone back to the Watson server in order to happen. So that's your data going back and being, clarified and stuff.
Well, that's a good point, though. Your model's only as good as your data. So if the users start giving it junk data, then their model's going to degrade over time potentially, right?
But at the flip side, it allows for user preferences. They can give it their own preference for the data, and it'll, start evolving the way that they want it to evolve.
Oh, this is where we need multiple users, because like when my kids use my devices, I don't want my devices to suddenly think that, I'm really into, Super Wings or Paw Patrol or something like that. And
Yeah.
You notice how I completely skipped over the Minecraft stuff that was introduced today. I've already warned my wife not to let a 13-year-old actually see the keynote, or else he's going to be screaming until I get back from the conference, because he's been dreaming of an immersive Minecraft in AR. But we'll skip that and we'll come back to Metal. And Metal itself,
just one last thing to add on ML.
Yeah, please do.
One interesting thing I thought is they removed Create ML, or maybe they didn't remove it. Maybe it's still there, but they created an app, like rather than using playgrounds and forcing people to write a little bit of Swift code. They created a standalone app so that now managers can create their core model.
Managers. The average developers, Ray, tell you what, no longer the scientists, anybui now.
Yeah. We were talking about the downside of Swift UI, and remember, you can now drag and drop and get code generated for you. So don't be surprised when your PMs go, "I wrote the app for you."
We should have mentioned this in the Sherlocking part, then, right? Apple's basically Sherlocking developers.
And that's why we don't go to sleep, because we're not watching our own backs.
I will say, just kind of going back to the signing with Apple real quick, someone in chat on the broadcast mentioned that it is actually in the updates to the App Store review guidelines where that blurb comes from.
Mm-hmm.
So I think Josh was asking where it came from. It is in there.
Okay. So Metal got some love. And some of that love was into a 56 teraflop box of hardware. But the ray tracing demonstration with the buses was terrifying, to say the least, with the shadowing and what was going on there. Which of you have been on the on Metal books, or have any of you been into that depth? Nope. Yeah, Metal is one of those things that there are only a few of us who really go that deep, and I know I'm not one of them. But just to summarize here, they said it was interesting because they gave 3 specific line items concerning Metal. They said it's easy to use. Mm-hmm. It's got the mathematical computation, and it's built for pros. So it's easy to use, but it's built for pros. And I thought that those 2 things together were an interesting combination, because it's like, well, if it's for the pros, it doesn't need to be easy. It's huge. And they just listed at an item of the GPU families and the Metal memory debugger and the Metal support to the iOS simulator. That's the one that I remember now was very important, that Metal was something that you couldn't debug easily unless you actually had a device that could run it. So Metal is now debuggable by running it in the iOS simulator, and that's a plus for that.
Didn't he say something that was like based on C or C++?
Yeah, it's isn't the Metal stuff. It's a C-like language that's it's
Metal shading language.
C# isn't it?
Metal shading language is based on the C++ standard with some additional attributes that you can. That's always been the case, though.
Yeah, there's a quote from someone who says something along the lines of like C++ has the advantages of like the speed of assembly along with the simplicity of assembly.
Well, I'm a C++ fan, so don't get me started.
I've written iOS apps in C++, so I'm not going to go there either.
So I think the best place to summarize, and I'm pretty sure I know what everyone's answer is, but I'm going to ask each of you. They said there's going to be 109 sessions plus this year, because there's so much material. There are 22 videos that aren't even going to be sessions at the conference that are available. What things are you most interested in looking into on a deeper dive this week? And I'm pretty sure I know what the answer is going to be across the board, but I'll ask it anyway. Yano, let's start with you.
Caffeine pills so I can get through everything. No, I actually highlighted a couple of sessions in my phone where I'm really interested in some of the new vision framework stuff that they have in there. There's a session on vision framework and how they do in photo processing, and the core ML stuff. Those are my top two things that I'm looking forward to checking out.
Right?
Swift, Swift UI and Swift. I'm actually looking forward to some of the pure Swift talks from people like Doug Greger. I think he's giving one on Thursday that I'm looking forward to seeing, as well as I think tomorrow starting at 11, there's the Swift UI. So we'll begin there.
Yeah, I think I just marked the main room from 9 a.m. straight on through for tomorrow. And I actually have a ticket to AltConf, and I was like, there are a couple of AltConf things I no longer am going to be able to actually go to because I'm just really drawn to that. Josh Green.
I'm with these guys. The Swift UI stuff is where I'm going to be spending a lot of my time, but I think my focus is going to be on answering the question, is this just for toy apps, or can I actually use this in, enterprise, full scale type things? Because we've seen the simple stuff. How is this going to scale for me? How am I actually going to use this and, make commercial money off of this?
Josh Steele.
I narrowed it down to 3 groups. Let's see, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday. No, that's all days. My first group was the What's New In. There was so much in this keynote that I think the What's New talks are going to be great. I'm also interested in looking at kind of transition your iPad apps to Mac to see what's really involved there. And then the AR stuff is where I have a great amount of interest, looking at Reality Kit, looking at Reality Composer, and just seeing what they've got new in ARKit.
Jen, is there anything you're going to be tracking for the rest of the week?
I want to make a memoji.
Yeah, there was the new Memoji and the amazing amount of detail that they've added in. And obviously for me, I'm always discouraged by Memoji because one, they have difficulty tracking my face versus the beard, and secondarily, they really don't do beards like I have. But I don't think anybody does beards like I have, so we're like that. I'm not sure if we. Audrey, what are you thinking of tracking for the rest of this week?
Well, got no choice. I got to do Swift UI because the tutorial's got to come out. And then after that, I'll be looking at the machine learning stuff.
So yeah, I really think that Swift UI is truly the game changer that was as one of you said was as big as the introduction of Swift as itself. A lot of people are going to be swimming to that session. I think a lot of people are going to be in the labs trying to get more detail on that. And there is a lot of questions as to how, Josh, you put very well, how is that going to scale up into, quote, real apps? There are so many questions we have, but I think we've had a really good feeding for this year after a couple of slow years, after a couple of mainly performance, small incremental fixes. This really a WWDC that I think is going to be one for the record books. I want to thank my entire team for being here. Audrey Tam, Jen Bailey, Josh Steele, Josh Green, Ray Fix, and Yana Milfeld. I want to thank Ray Wenderlich for putting this together as always. And of course, we do want to thank Full Byte, that's Byte, BYTE, sponsoring the Ray Wenderlich podcast for season 9. We will be continuing to do tutorials on this. We'll be probably taking a look at this on the podcast in later weeks. There will be another, we'll be having the John Sundell episode coming up in about 2 weeks. And other than that, I want to again thank you, the listeners and viewers, for this, and we will continue on the podcast. Thank you all for tuning in. So long.
Bye.